Okay, let's just jump right in. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're uncovering a piece of history that is, honestly, almost always completely overlooked. We're going to explore a narrative that literally challenges our standard historical timelines, and we're doing it by looking at one of the most unbelievable documents ever uncovered in America. This is the untold story of Omar Ibn Said. It's a story of profound loss, incredible resilience, and really the sheer power of human memory.
I want you to think about this quote for a second. There are millions of stories hidden inside history. I mean, it's true, right? Throughout time, so many lives were never even written down. Countless stories were intentionally destroyed, or they just kind of faded away, completely forgotten by time. But against all odds, one man actually managed to leave behind something so incredibly rare, basically making sure his voice would echo across centuries.
His name was Omar Ibn Said. Just take a moment to let that name sink in. See, what makes Omar's story so incredibly unique is that he left behind his own story, written in Arabic. We're talking about an authentic, first-hand account from an enslaved African Muslim. The absolute rarity of this document, you really can't overstate it. It is literally a voice from the past, speaking right to us in his own words.
Chapter 1. A Forgotten American Voice.
Now, the details we're going to go through are probably going to challenge a lot of what you think you know about early American history. We usually get this very simplified, neatly packaged version of the past, but the reality is so much more beautifully complex. We are looking at a rare, first-hand Arabic autobiography by an enslaved African Muslim. So this isn't someone else writing about him, right? It's not some second-hand guess or interpretation. This document is like a physical bridge. It irreplaceably connects African history, Islamic history, and American history, proving these worlds were deeply intertwined way before most traditional history books would ever acknowledge.
Chapter 2. Scholar of West Africa.
To really grasp the weight of this document, we have to actively push back against a very common historical trope. You know the one? Where history sometimes talks about enslaved Africans as if their lives somehow just magically started the second they hit American shores. Well, Omar's story did not begin at the point of his enslavement. Actually born around 1770 in West Africa, Omar grew up in a really vibrant Muslim environment. He was highly educated in Arabic. He spent years studying the Quran and complex religious texts. He was a scholar. He was deeply rooted in a rich civilization that had its own intellectual traditions, respected teachers, and thriving communities. He had a homeland. He had a language, an education, and a really bright future.
Chapter 3. Stolen Across the Atlantic.
And then came the moment that violently ended that future. Just like that, his freedom was stolen, and the life he knew was completely shattered. On one hand, you have an educated, highly respected Muslim scholar in West Africa, and then, in the blink of an eye, he's thrust into an absolute nightmare, enslaved in South Carolina. Imagine that profound psychological shock for a second. Forced to cross an ocean, ripped away from everyone he loved, and suddenly surrounded by people whose language he couldn't even understand. A respected scholar with a rich past, abruptly forced into a society that stripped away his freedom, treated him as property, and dictated that he live entirely under someone else's control.
But Omar remembered. Despite the horrific violence and dehumanization of the transatlantic slave trade, and despite his captors taking his home and his freedom, they absolutely could not take his mind. His internal world was still entirely his own.
His journey is wild. It spans continents and decades. Starting back in 1770 in West Africa, surviving that traumatic Atlantic crossing decades later, and then making a desperate attempt to take back his agency. He actually escaped, spending days on the run until he reached Fayetteville, North Carolina. And then, years later, performing this monumental act of actually writing his autobiography. We don't even need to get bogged down in the exact dates here to see the incredible trajectory of a man fighting tooth and nail to keep his identity alive.
Chapter 4. The Voice in the Church.
So, that escape leads us to this really pivotal moment. While he's on the run in North Carolina, Omar takes this incredibly dangerous but profoundly important risk just to make himself seen. Picture this. Omar sneaks into a church in Fayetteville, and he does something you'd never expect from an escaped enslaved man in the American South. He began writing Arabic on the walls. Now, to the people who eventually found him, these letters were just complete gibberish. But to Omar, they were deeply, deeply familiar. It was the language of his education, the language of his faith. In that terrifying moment, those foreign letters on a wall were his vital, unbreakable connection to the world he'd lost. His escape didn't last long. He was recaptured, but his voice was officially starting to break through.
Chapter 5. Writing as Resistance. It is absolutely crucial to understand that the physical act of writing his autobiography wasn't just him jotting down a record of events. No way. This was a deliberate, active rebellion. By putting pen to paper in Arabic, Umar was essentially shouting across time. He was declaring, I was here. He was stating, I had a home. He was proving, I had knowledge. And maybe most importantly, I am more than slavery. Every single Arabic letter on that page carried his memory, his identity, and this totally unbreakable spirit.
He refused to become invisible. Just think about the sheer willpower it takes to maintain that sense of self. The whole world around him was trying its absolute hardest to define him only by what had happened to him, to reduce him to a label. But Omar forcefully, completely rejected that erasure. Chapter 6. The Power of Memory.
Slavery tried to systematically control literally every single aspect of a person's physical life. But as Omar's story so brilliantly proves, it completely failed to conquer his mind and his soul. His memory became his fortress. He remembered Africa, he remembered Arabic, he remembered Islam, and he remembered the Quran. For Omar, his faith wasn't just some separate thing. It was woven directly into his identity. Every time he recited a verse, every time he pictured his homeland, he was protecting a piece of himself that his captors simply could not touch, could not steal, and could not destroy. So while his physical reality was imprisoned, bound by slavery, heavily controlled by his captors, his memory and his faith achieved the ultimate victory. His physical body was trapped, for sure, but his words, they crossed oceans and they crossed generations. The people who captured him, they're long gone, but Omar's voice, it is still traveling across the centuries. He is literally speaking to us right now.
And he pulled this off through just one surviving first-hand account, just one single document of its kind. But let me tell you, this one unparalleled text completely shatters a major misunderstanding. When people think about the history of Islam in America, they almost always imagine it as this super recent development. But this one document proves that among the countless Africans forced into slavery were highly educated Muslims who knew Arabic, practiced their faith, and brought their rich religious traditions right along with them to early America. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, kind of provocative thought to chew on. If history tried to erase you, what would you leave behind? Omar Ibn Said left behind a voice, a testament to an unconquered spirit, an absolute proof that a human being is always more than what happens to them. His legacy is a powerful reminder that even in the absolute darkest of circumstances, people can still hold on to memory, they can hold on to faith, and they can make sure they are never, ever completely forgotten. If you found this journey into history as fascinating as I did, and you agree that these forgotten stories desperately need to be brought into the light, make sure you hit subscribe. We have so many more incredible explainers coming your way. Catch you next time.